I'm going to get us right started because we have so much to cover tonight. All amazing things. We have amazing guests. It's going to be wonderful. But thank you guys so much for joining our final weeks of action for our anti-imperialist campaign action week. These weeks, as you guys have known, we've had so many of them already, but they were designed to go deeper with each of our Code Pink campaigns, learn more about the people behind the movements, and how all of our liberation work is connected to Palestine, Venezuela, Cuba, to peace with China, to peace with the planet, and as tonight will show, to building our own local peace economies. If you've missed any of our webinars, our actions, or you didn't grab some of our resources that we've created, I will be sending our archive resource links throughout the chat tonight and all of our current local peace economy links. So you will get everything here today and in an email later. I'm going to first go over just some norms to keep everybody in good spirits and to keep this recording preserved for years and years to come. And then I'm going to pass it to Jodie to get started. But as always, please be respectful. This isn't a debate, but a discussion. We are not here to mediate arguments. We're here to learn from each other. Be kind, be curious, be ready to take action. And please, please, please stay muted. We record, we live stream these classes, we put them on our website. We want people to enjoy it, to use it, to educate themselves and their communities long past tonight. So please, please, please stay muted, put your thoughts in the chat, and I'm going to pass it over to Jodie Evans.
Thank you so much, Grace. It's the end of this, and I'm just so grateful for all the ways you've held it together and held this community together. So thank you, Grace, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today to learn more about cultivating a local peace economy in this holiday season, which is the perfect time to be paying attention to how we cultivate peace. So here we are on the 8th of December. In 1941, the US officially entered World War II. The day after the surprise Pearl Harbor attack. That's 84 years that have gone by. And we went from fighting fascism and Nazis to electing them. I'm going to start out with today's going to be a lot of history because I think it's important for all of us as activists to always ground ourselves in history and the moment. And we're in a time where the moment is changing rapidly. I'm going to bring in a lot of history today. So I'm going to bring in President Eisenhower, who, we use often because he warned about the military industrial complex, who said that every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fire signifies, in the final sense, a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, and those who are cold and not clothed. So I want us to look at that. And that was said the year I was born. So that's 71 years ago. These are all very recent. And I'm in China talking to you, a country that, then everyone was in poverty. It was the fourth most impoverished country in the world. And everyone is now fed and clothed. As we just reflect on history, on the moment, and where we live, I would say most Code Pink activists live inside the empire. And just always the reminder that living in the empire makes us stupid. It makes us see the world in a distorted way. And one of the things I think the local peace economy helps us do is ground ourselves in reality and ground ourselves in relationship that makes us so much smarter. And it also makes us great organizers. Our organizing always increases capacity, intensity, and strength the more we ground ourselves in the local peace economy. So next I'm going to move to 1983 and one of my favorite authors, who's Wendell Berry, also the father of the local peace economy and the recognition of the world we live in and the grounding ourselves where truth is, where the immediacy of reality helps us be smarter and kinder. In 1983, he wrote The Real Work, and I feel like it meets this moment perfectly. It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work, and then we no longer know which way to go. We have come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings. So I'm going to start out today a lot about the war economy as an encouragement of why the peace economy is so necessary. So every day you pick up the paper and there's another unreasonable thing happening. It's illegal, immoral, and unconstitutional. But we started good being there with the US driving a war on what everyone knew was an innocent country, Iraq. May I remind everyone that war was driven by Israel. The normalizing of horrors has engulfed us in the last 24 years. Since 9/11, our minds have been torched, engulfed, and owned by the war economy. They swept in after 9/11 and made it work for them, the war economy, like they do with all wars. Truth tellers are killed or jailed. Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning, they showed us how horrific the US war in Iraq was. And Ed Snowden, he showed us who was profiting, and he also showed us that we were being used and footing the bill. So in the local peace economy framework, we start with what is the war economy? And that is what really drove me to starting the local peace economy. And it happened during the Obama administration. It became so clear that we could not end war until we ended the war economy. We say follow the money, right, in our work? Well, the money was on war because it was what protected the assets. You know, it's like war is sold to us that it's making us safer in America, but it's actually what protects the assets of the capitalists and allows them to steal from all the other countries. Why 800 bases? To be imperialists, to be the hegemony and control the assets of the world. The war economy, capitalism, was what war served. Not freedom, not protection of anyone, but the naked violence and oppression of capitalism. The wolf in sheep's clothing. And I want to say the sheep's clothing is democracy. So I ran a presidential campaign in 1992. The message of the campaign was we must get money out of politics or it doesn't matter what you care for. Money will win. Also hate being right because white's right is the booby prize. You know, they're still off doing everything when we're naming what it is. So Jerry Brown carried that message, and our donation cap was $100. We became a cultural success, but the Democratic Party smashed us in every way that they could, including using anti-Semitism. Yes, it's been around for decades. Then there were very few billionaires, and they didn't have much money in politics. You know, it was a pivot point from, money in politics is bad to beat Jerry Brown and let's just pull all the money in Clinton. So we could see that inequality was going to grow with the more money in politics, since it had totally already upended the values of the 60s and 70s. You know, they did murder anyone that was leading on socialist peace economy values or speaking against the US empire. And then we had, after the murders, the takeover of the neoliberals with Reagan, demolishing, the global South and making the rich richer. So 33 years later, money in politics is grotesque. It truly doesn't matter what you care for, money wins. Except when you're serving the movement, which is the peace economy. When we look at Mandami, why did he win? He won because peace economies had developed over a decade. And it is the people from those peace economy communities in New York City that were the campaign. So it's like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. They represent the community. They represent their peace economy. They represent the movements, the people, where they live. They don't represent the money. So we can see with stark differences the difference between the Moore economy and the difference between the peace economy. Medina shows it to us every day in her videos of what happens when you're owned by the money. It's pretty grotesque. So 23 years ago, Medina and I called Code Pink to George W. Bush's Code Red, Orange, and Yellow. He was lying to frighten the American people to agree to war. That propaganda has increased in the same way the ownership of the political class has increased, because it is money that pays for that propaganda. So at that time, there were 270 billionaires in the US worth $1.8 trillion. Today, there are 3,000 billionaires worldwide worth 16 trillion. So the total wealth of billionaires has grown ninefold. By the way, while the bottom 50% has gotten poorer. And the number of billionaires has grown 5. So I want us to look at the concentration of wealth, the extreme inequality, and this is happening while the wars are continuing, but it matters. It matters that the war economy is gotten so much larger and so much more consolidated. They've been made rich by the military industrial complex. 65% of our tax dollars go to the military industrial complex, and that makes the rich richer. We, the taxpayers, have paid for what they are renting back to us. That technology came out of your tax dollars. The military budget has doubled since 2000, and over half of it goes to private contractors. And I looked it up yesterday, and you know that most of those private contractors are housed in DC, Virginia, and Maryland. So, like, even when it's about things outside of the United States, the wealth stays inside the United States. And we saw that with Iraq and Afghanistan. So, this represents a massive transfer of public funds to private corporations. Yes, we know war makes the rich richer. As we say, they're making a killing on killing. They then use our tax dollars that they've become richer with to lobby Congress and get even more money. So we know that circle. I'm going to introduce you to another one. So I know we're aware of like the word techno-fascist and, you know, who that conversation is out here. I want to connect it to war today. So they represent the largest percentage of billionaires. Tech billionaires are 32% of the wealth, but they're 8 of the top 10. And Bezos and Musk together have more money than the bottom 50% of the United States. This is a concentration of wealth the world has never seen. And we can only look to Palestine to see what the concentration of wealth and power does and how it can silence a world. So we're looking at this war economy visual because it's how the billionaires are getting into position of powers or their puppets is also new. There is nothing more frightening than Peter Thiel and his puppet, J.D. Vance. The military industrial complex was one thing, but now we have weapons we don't even know. We have watched Palantir and its violence against the Palestinians, Lebanese, Houthi, Syrians, and now these tools, paid for by us with our tax dollars, are aimed at us. They are impossible to understand. They are in a black box that is automated welfare, managing immigration, cutting governments, surveilling our daily lives. The war is now on us. It has moved inside. This is radically new. That money now has political power. They are deploying their capital to control everything, prioritizing everything that used to be under government accountability and infrastructure that used to govern those systems is now being dismantled. In July 2025, deep within the Pentagon's bureaucracy machinery, the US Army quietly signed away a critical piece of its sovereignty, which already had been eradicated during Iraq and Afghanistan. A $10 billion contract with Palantir Technologies. So this has never happened in the Department of not defense, but wars history, consolidating 75 separate government procurement agreements into a single package. What looked like bureaucratic streamlining was in reality a strategic handover of core military functions to a private company whose founder is Peter Thiel. And he's openly declared that freedom and democracy are no longer compatible. So, beyond Palantir, under a banner of patriotic tech, a coalition of firms, funders, and ideologues is engineering a planetary infrastructure for techno-political control. It's a stack system with cloud platforms, AI models, financial rails, drone networks, orbital systems, forming what Francesca Bria, who has authored this the authoritarian stack, where traditional authoritarianism used to rely on mass mobilization and state violence. This system operates through technological infrastructure and financial coordination, making classic resistance appear not just difficult, but almost obsolete. At the helm stands Silicon Valley's most right-wing figures, Thiel, Musk, Andreessen, Sachs, Palmer Luckey, and Alexander Karp, who we can laugh at him on cocaine, but I want to say when you look at that, that is pulling levers of violence. And I always say that these people, people with power and money, like our senators and our Congress people and people with too much wealth, they're on crack cocaine. It was really ridiculous to see him like actually on cocaine, but it was good to watch how insane that makes people. So the critical infrastructures of the state are being replaced and reinstalled across the strategic domains of personal information, money supply, defense, orbital communication, and energy, the very foundations of democratic control. And I'm going to ask Grace to show us a little of Francesca's brilliant work that, by the way, was funded by the German government, even as it's being used by all of this. So thanks, Grace. So we're going to put in our response to you of coming and some of the notes, we're going to put your opportunity to see this. So I'm going to run through it really quick. So if we can go down pretty quick, the authoritarian tech network kingmakers is a very small circle. Keep going, Grace. So I'm just tempting you to come back and see it. This is the personnel pipeline of capture of the White House, of the Army. They're like literally installing their people that they have trained, Chief Information Officer, Federal Chief Information Officer. You can keep going, Grace. And then the one I mentioned where we have the US Army now is fully infiltrated by these horrible things we saw working in Palestine. So that I just want to stop here for a sec because I want to read Francesca's words here. You know, it's a self-reinforcing loop. Ideology fuels venture capital. You know, we our ideology fuels us in the streets, in creating community, in building a movement. Their ideology fuels venture capital. The capital captures the state. The state feeds the same private system that built it, and it has created a privatized sovereignty. I think if we really think for a moment, we will know what that feels like, having gone against Israel. So I want everybody to understand this, because when I say a war economy, I want you to feel it. So thanks, Grace. We can keep going. And into you can follow the money. We know it always comes from the taxpayers, and then we create the thing, and then venture capital comes in. Here's the stacked of private sovereignty: crypto, nuclear AI, SpaceX, Adderall, and Palantir. They've stacked themselves, so they know what they're doing together. Francesca wrote this for Europe as a warning, so I'm stealing it as a warning for us. If you could keep going to the map. So here's the authoritarian tech complex map. And if you just lightly touch on some of the center things and show this interconnectivity between all of them and what's happening. So with very few people, this whole thing is being controlled, from policy to companies to state. So there is the map that you will be able to access on your own. But I just wanted to give you a sense that it has been mapped. And mapping is a very, very important part of the local peace economy. So the war economy has been mapped, and mapping the peace economy, I want you to feel how important that is. Thank you so much, Grace. Now, they're using a structure that is technologically driven. I want you to know that the peace economy is the mycelium of life. The mycelium, it is the mushrooms. We are the mushrooms, and we are all connected. So we don't need the technological hold together. Life connects life. And when we are cultivating a peace economy, we are cultivating life. So you can see that we're not in that party. So you can feel very like, that's not us, but let's go to us. Let's go to what we are doing. When I said war economy 15 years ago, I said global climate change, global inequality, coming AI, and fascism. They're the tsunami that is coming at us. But AI and fascism are here. And I wanted to take you below the surface into a deep understanding of what it means and where we are, because I think it's important that we always start there. And that way we know what we're pivoting from. And it also gives us that, clarity. Clarity really helps us do what is needed yet next. We can say that as campaigners at Code Pink, we work really hard on finding the clarity that can both be articulated, the truth that can be exposed, and then what we can do about it. So it's always about knowing so that we know what to do about it. An imbalance between rich and poor is the oldest, most fatal ailment of all republics. Plutarch said that. So in going back to wisdom of the old, we've always known it was the wisdom that our leaders should have held. It's certainly the wisdom indigenous leaders held, that an imbalance of rich and poor creates violence. And it is the end of empires, as we've seen throughout history. And I want to bring us to a wise elder of mine, Bucky Fuller, who has always been, someone that led my activism. You can never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you need to build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And I want to say love and connection is an attractor. So there is something about the work economy that becomes like a magnet. And that magnet just is drawing everyone in. It's like a dark magnet. Well, we need to work to create a magnet that is peace. And taking ourselves off of that magnet of the war economy and cultivating this magnet that is the peace economy. And life attracts life. So the more that we engage in the peace economy and what serves life, the stronger that magnet becomes. It's like we're making peace cool again, but it takes all of our efforts. It takes our energy, our commitment, and our engagement to build that power, that, whirling sphere that is pulling people off the war economy into the peace economy. And also in this moment of time of what I just showed you about the war economy, we can see the young people especially falling off the ownership that the war economy used to have on all of us and moving into what else is there. So we need to constantly be building it because they're seeing and they're available to be building the local peace economy, which is building the movement. The interconnection of our work, that is the work of scratching at and exposing power, slowing down the war economy. That is our work, but that becomes even more effective as we build our peace economies, because the practices of peace build the strength and power and help us stay not used by the war economy. So the first thing I say is let's review how we invest our time. How much of your day is owned by the war economy? How has it enslaved you? It's enslaving people. It's like taking the best of us. I see it goes in and hooks our hearts in the most horrific ways, as those color coded alerts did to people when Bush was calling them out and making them afraid. It's like there are things in the war economy that have enslaved us, certainly have enslaved me. And the breaking away from them is what we'll talk about. Marie and Macy are going to talk about later. But I want in this 2 weeks that we're, spending together, that one of the things you do over the 2 weeks is an inventory, an audit. The war economy is going to fill their audit in the next few weeks. Let's do an audit of our time, ourselves. This is what we have to offer the world. This beautiful being, this life that we are, that is so beautiful and fragile and abundant and energetic, full of energy. It's like we are so complex. What the war economy does is it simplifies. We are not simple. We are all complex, and we need to get back to that complexity, that layeredness. We need to get out of the us versus them, the black and the white. Inside we're all pink. How do we come into being with life that we are? So I encourage everyone to find a way to, at the end of your day, to kind of reflect. When did the war economy own me, and when was I directing the future with my life? Because cultivating a local peace economy is cultivating the future. They have plans, right? We have to have the plan in place, because if we're spending all our time on the war economy, even hating on it, it's owning us. Hating on the war economy, letting it make us fret. As soon as you find yourself hating on it and fretting on it, pivot. What can I be doing for peace? Because the only thing we can be doing is cultivating something else. It is doing its thing, and it doesn't really care that we exist, except when we can be those little mosquitoes in the net and bite at it and slow it down and make it uncomfortable. We will continue to do that in all the ways that we can think up, and all the ways, that we can work in this next year to hold the war mongers accountable, at least to the public, even if the structures are not going to do it. We together hold it accountable together, and that slows it down. So you can look at we've created the pivots, and maybe, Grace, now is a good time to bring up the pivots. So how do we make this visible, the peace economy and the war economy, and where they move from one to the other, um, are the pivots. Um, and so uh, you can look at the pivots to observe where the war economy owns you by looking at the pivots of the war economy addictions. I call them addictions, um, because they are behaviors that are forced on us to succeed and thrive in the war economy. And they are not good for us. They're not good for our relationships. They're not good for the community, and they're not good for peace. So when we find them, you don't have to worry about breaking an addiction. All you have to do is engage and pivot in the practice of peace. And so it's a simple move. Um, the hard part is doing it. So, that's where we're exercising these new muscles. We are building the muscles for peace and joy and coming back to the way that the indigenous have survived for millennia, the wisdom of those that lived in complex societies where Western white entered and said, "You're not civilized, we are, but we are recognizing the barbarism of the people that said they were civilized. They are barbaric. The war economy is barbaric. The cultures that they suppressed were the culture, were the complexities connected to life. So in this pivot, I'm just, helping you be like, where am I in this? This is death. This is life. This is barbarism. This is everything that we have been witnessing in Palestine. This is who the Palestinians are. Their existence is resistance. Practicing the peace economy, because they are the peace economy, is the resistance with our existence. So using those two things as you practice your pivot. So there is so much more to the local peace economy. We'll talk more next week, and we are going to. There's an article that you will get this week on Substack that takes you even deeper into it, and there's lots of videos to watch at peaceeconomy.org, which has been birthed out of this work at Code Pink to stand in the way of war. I want to take this structure I've been talking about, and then take you into the beauty. And Marie Goodwin, who runs the Local Peace Economy Project, who's been part of this movement for a very long time, is going to share her process. And then Macy, one of our local organizers, one of the people I love being in the streets with, and who went flew to Egypt to be part of the global march, and always finds the abundance and the ways to be a really radical activist while cultivating her local peace economy, will share also. So I'm going to turn it over to Marie now, and then Marie will turn it over to Macy. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jodie. I'm Marie Goodwin, the Local Peace Economy Coordinator. And as Jodie said, I've been, even before I'd heard of Code Pink, I was really trying to examine the way that I was controlled and captured by the systems, the failing systems that I could see were alive in our culture. And since the birth of my children, actually, that actually is what helped me understand that a little bit better. And my children are now in college, and so it's been a long time. And so this work at Code Pink really feels like it feeds something really beautiful and is sort of a collection of the experiences that I've had in my adult life, trying to do this work and trying to parse it out. Um, so Jodie asked me to share what my day looks like as a peace economy activist. And I'm going to preface this by saying that my day looked very different when I had children in my house. And also that I've spent a lot of time trying to find balance. I think everybody probably on this call understands that you can be an activist at different levels, and I have spent concentrations of time being an activist for my personal growth and doing meditating and going to therapy and really working on my physical self. I've been an activist for my family. I unschooled my children. I really got into cooking good, nutritious meals for my family. I spent time growing food for my family. I was a community activist. I worked in the transition town movement here in media, opened a free store, started a time bank, and I've also done activism at a large scale and done advocacy for larger voices trying to make change in the world. And so we can do activism on four levels, and you know, and ideally you should be trying to balance that kind of activism as much as you can in your life. And different seasons mean that you might concentrate on one over the other. But I find that if I feel balanced in all four areas of my life, that I feel like I'm accomplishing more by being less busy. So here is what my daily um, life is like today. And I also want to say that I know that I have the privilege of working as a local peace economy person. So my work is really enmeshed with what I do and how I live. Um, so waking up every day, I wake up without an alarm. I try most of the time to keep that at bay. And in fact, I leave my phone downstairs and really work hard not to look at my phone or look at my computer for an hour after I wake up. And I feel it's really important not to be triggered in the morning by everything that's gone wrong in the world or some sort of emergency that might be happening in different parts of my world. I really try to keep my morning sacred. And so I'll have breakfast and maybe go for a walk before getting on my phone and my computer. And the first thing I do is I go outside on my porch with my phone and my computer, and that's where I work in the morning before lunch. And I'm disturbed all the time by neighbors who walk by me with their dogs. And I make an effort to talk to everybody. And I've lived in this neighborhood for 5 years and I've become friends with most everybody in the neighborhood. And I bribe the dogs to come on my porch with treats. And I have lots of dog friends that visit me every day. The weather's getting a little cold for this ritual, but I still try to go out as much as I can. And I think it's really important to get sunshine in my eyes and to feel invigorated by meeting people, even if it doesn't make me as efficient in the morning as I'd like to be. Then I go in and I fix lunch. Lunch is my biggest meal of the day. And I have spent a lot of time sourcing the food that we eat in my family from local farms. Um, we have a Trader Joe's in town. We have all the stores in town, and we go there as little as possible. So there's a local dairy nearby. I get my milk from there. CSAs. Even in the winter, I have found ways to provide my food to be local food. And it might be a little bit more expensive, but I've spent a lot of time really refining that as a processed food. I grew a lot of my own food for a long time when I was lived at another house, the one that I don't live in now, and it had acreage. And I could grow some food, but now I just really find it important to feed my body with local food and not bring in food from, spinach from China when you can grow spinach in your yard um, or find a farmer nearby. And then after lunch, I take care of my body. I will either lift weights or stretch or go for a walk. And I try to do that a little bit every day. And then I come back for the afternoon and I have an afternoon session of work. I try to work 6 to 7 hours a day on the local peace economy work. And so I spend my afternoon doing that work and I try to end by 4. Um, it's really important to remember that even if your work isn't local peace economy work, we're all enmeshed in the war economy in some way, shape, or form, in many ways, shapes, or form. We're all enmeshed in it. And so my husband is a graphic designer. A lot of his clients are people that are deep in the war economy. Um, he has provided for our family and is a very good father. And a lot of people beat themselves up because they have jobs that feel, like war economy-esque. And I don't think that we can beat ourselves up by what we have to do to survive in this system. And it's really important to recognize that we're trying to survive. um, if you recognize that that's what the work is that you're doing day to day, you can also work outside of that system in other ways to try and build peace and commitment and commit to community in your life. Um, so in my working day, I sometimes take a nap because I'm old, and then make dinner with my husband, and then we spend both of us our evening on creative projects. So I'm a potter, and I have a community of friends who are all potters, and I either go to be in community with them, um, or I do creative work in my basement. I have a small studio in my basement. Or my husband and I like to play by going out and dancing. We enjoy electronic music, and most people our age don't enjoy it, but we really do. And so we go to lots of festivals. We go dancing once or twice a week. We have a huge community of friends who also go out dancing, and we just spend a lot of time trying to play. Um, I want to admit that a lot of the work that I did in my community when I had small children, it took a lot of pushing of myself, and I'm going to talk about pivoting. I took a lot of energy to pivot because I have a tendency to introversion, and I'm very happy by myself and in my house. And I really began to feel that community, especially for my family, was very important. And so I put a lot of energy into building these communities of potters and going dancing, and my community of activists in town. I spent a lot of time pushing myself as an introvert to putting extroverted energy, because the world kind of needs the introverts to step up and do that. And I recognize that. And that's an important part of it, is that it's really easy to become sort of um, confined by our schedules because they feel comfortable, but it's really good for us to go out. Like I said, my days look very different when I had children because I homeschooled. I had other jobs that were remote so that I could work around the homeschooling. But I was also really working on building my local community. And so I had meetings, sometimes 6 or 7 meetings a week in my house. I was really effective at the work I was doing, but I had a really hard time with balance in my life. I sometimes felt overwhelmed by it. And as I've gotten older, I'm finding that I can balance things more easily. So I feel that I've worked on pivots without really having a name for them. And until I became engaged in the local peace economy work, I didn't really have a name for what the pivots were. And I'm really grateful to Jodie for giving me and Code Pink for giving me that vocabulary. Pivots that I feel that I've really worked on, and that I've incorporated into my life. I've moved from apathy, which is a kind of overwhelm like by all the horrors. I feel I've overcome apathy and feel engaged, and I do feel engaged, but at different levels. I also feel that I've moved well into from restraint to pleasure. I spent a lot of my time not prioritizing my own joy and pleasure. I saw it as childish and kind of a waste of time. And I now embrace it. Like I say, we go dancing and I play and I have fun, and I prioritize my creativity. Um, from consumption to creation, I feel it's really important, and have tried very hard to learn how to make real things, whether it be learning how to make kimchi and sauerkraut, or to can, or whether it's being a potter, or making my own clothes, or mending my own clothes even. I feel it's really important to, wherever we can create and own um, the creation of things, that instead of relying on consumption and Target and Amazon to provide us with what we have, we can make do with what we have and create what we need. And I've also really worked, and this is a struggle in today's political climate, the us versus them in all of us. I've I struggled early on with that, and now I feel that I'm really dedicated to building bridges between peoples and not trying to demand perfection of community and activist groups and making sure that we're aligned 100% on everything. I know from experience that we can build community by people who are very different from us. Pivots that I really need to work on, from distraction to attention. I am easily distracted. I have a life filled with shoulds, and I get very distracted by the shoulds. What should I be doing? How should I be acting? Um, and by social media and by all of the sort of disaster chaos that's around us. Um, I also need to work on going from being reactionary to being, because from being like moving out of being reactionary. The social media really triggers me, and sometimes I feel my, energy rising inside of me, and that sort of the almost the pleasure of feeling outrage. And I'm really trying to stop that because it's not productive and it doesn't help create anything of value. From productivity to engagement, I always fall into the trap of trying to be productive. And I think that that is a trap, and that being and prioritizing engagement with other people over simply being productive is important. And from limitation to imagination. I feel limited by time, by lack of money, lack of energy. As I said, I'm getting older and needing naps. I have to actively not give myself excuses and to imagine different ways of helping others and getting my needs met in the process. So that is a little bit of an insight into my life. And so now I'll pass it over to Macy to talk about hers.
Hi, Macy, are you there? Oh no. Tap buttons. Can you see me?
Great, you're good.
Okay. Um, I ended up with very little time. You're sure you can see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay. Because my phone says safe driving mode, so I can't see me, but it's great if you can. Um, I didn't end up with a lot of time to put this together necessarily or time it as promised, Jodie, but I did want to start um pivoting, if you will, off of Marie's comments and say that I also struggled with us versus them. I kind of clung to that, like it needed to be part of my identity, that there was an enemy. And it's very interesting to like diversify that concept. But I have some stories that relate to transitional versus reactional, perhaps control to empowerment, scarcity to abundance for sure, and accumulation to sharing resources, with an emphasis at, as always, on revolution. I don't care where you put that word, it's my favorite.
Macy, you muted yourself.
This is interesting. I'd love it if I could get it off safe driving mode, and I know you're editing this. Jodie,
Yes.
can you
Well,
see my
you're,
screen?
yeah, well, you're there, Macy. So just keep talking. It's okay.
Okay, well, the first thing I wanted to say is that I think this, and I can't see it, because I'm on safe driving mode. But if you
No,
can see this picture,
it's okay, Macy. You can just talk because it's sideways and
okay. Um, I think my first experiment in community was actually when a local Grange that I was an officer at said you can't count community service hours for handing out water to the Pride Parade, and I took issue with that. So I rented my own Grange hall as an officer there and a rental agent, and I waited until we're out of town at their convention and cold called every business in town with hesitation because I believed that this was some kind of controversial issue. And it turned out to be like the most immaculate celebration of joy. I called Windermere Real Estate, I called US Bank, I called the library and schools and like honestly anything I can this ago, maybe 5 years ago, but it it occurred to
Macy,
me
Macy,
after
we're
seeing this like
Macy, we're not really hearing you clearly. There, it's hi.
I'm gonna leave and disconnect and reconnect.
Okay. All right. Well, while we're waiting for Macy to come back, um, and you've gotten a little bit of the pivots from Marie, uh, that what we're talking about here when we're talking about pivoting to a local peace economy is a leap of the heart and the mind that we belong here, that this is our home sweet home to care for. And you learn in the peace economy book that economy means the making of home. So it's a good place to start. And I think Marie really reflected that making of home sweet home in her telling of her story. And when we are making that home sweet home for where we are for our community, it reverberates to the world, because if there's no example of what it is to care for, what peace grows inside of. It's interesting to hear both Macy and Marie struggling with the otherness. The war economy has forced that otherness onto us. The the brittleness that we see in our country and in ourselves, it's forced on us by the war economy. And so just reflecting on what are these things that are they serving life? Are they serving peace? The reflection of what is life starts with us, but it only can happen in community. And sometimes practicing these pivots are the most fun in community. And when we're doing the workbook in a community, or we're working on serving the community together, they tend to arise, and may we always within ourselves, with each other, and with others, have that compassion for the fact that we live inside of a war economy, that it forces behaviors on us, that we live in, PTSD for all the traumas that never get healed or recognized, and they get poured on top of us. The last 2 years, I mean, for me, it was Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya and the Houthis and Syria and Somalia and across Africa, across Latin America, what we do. It's like the constant just overwhelm. May we let that remind us that it's really the pivot, that what is the pivot? Because the judgment, the shoulds, they don't serve the future, and we have a future to serve. because we're alive on this living planet that is not a supply house, it is not a sewer, it is our larger body. And it needs our courage, it needs our interconnectedness. You know, the Palestinians teach us how to be. They teach us that courage and interconnectedness. When we witness it in them, it gives us courage and reminds us what life is. It's, you know, why are we showing up for it? Because we see life there, and we see the vibrance and the fierceness and the beauty of life. So that
Jodie, do you want me to
yeah, I'm gonna
to
just finish up a bit. So, you know, how that fearlessness and positive, um, the positivity in the face of utter madness and barbarism, it's our power. Building the movement is our power. I'm going to go back to Macy to tell us what that looks like, as she's very engaged in her local peace economies, and what stories she can tell us about the magic of her engagement.
Re-engaging in the first story, like they canceled our gay pride parade on Whidbey, where I'm from, Whidbey Island, small places I'm talking about. Also, why my internet is out. But I called every place that I was too afraid to call, and almost all of them showed up. I called a real estate company, I called a mainstream banking company, I called school districts, I called everybody, and they showed up, and they had this just beautiful pride, not parade, but picnic for our youth on Whidbey Island. And I think that's when I learned exactly what power I have. And it was in knowing a need and investigating and asking. Because it was on the front page of the papers, and it was beautiful. And what it took was just a touch of bravery and a touch of trust in myself. And I did want to mention one of my friend's stories that I'd mentioned in passing, but she started something called the Garage of Blessings also on my island. And it was just a garage sale where everything was free. And then everybody started bringing over other free stuff. And when people would come, she'd say, it's not, there's no price, it's a garage of blessings. And this, with very little time and very little like other people's involvement, like snowballed into an actual store that was a garage of blessings that then got grants to operate with other programs for education and childcare within our community, all because the old lady down the street from me said everything at my garage sale is free. And people started picking up on that and thinking, well, I'll bring my free stuff to your garage sale. And she just sat out there day after day after day after day after day till it got to be an entity of its own. That is one of my most beautiful stories from where I'm from. I also have a project I've been working on for 4 years that resulted in a legitimate success story for my community, and that was just meeting together with people who have dogs or cats or guinea pigs, and and um and trying to figure out how we could establish a local veterinary clinic for after hours, because we didn't have one. So firstly, we had to determine why they didn't have one, and it was mostly because of housing problems for the staff. But we were able, after 4 years of like just talking to people, just going out and saying, we're trying to set up a pet emergency clinic. Would you like to be on a mailing list? Would you like to help? After 4 years, we have one, and we have like immaculate brochures and magnets, and nobody has to leave town for a pet emergency. In the past, you had to drive 2 hours. And I'm thinking about a specific story. that has less to do with knowing what you have to offer, but more to do with asking. In this is a shift to as regards activism. I had a friend, or rather, I had a stranger contact me, a semi-stranger, and some other people to ask if we would be willing to support him in bird dogging a representative who was coming to our town. And I was friends with a number of the people that he contacted. It was kind of like he just spread it all over the place, asking sincerely for help because he wasn't confident in being able to do it himself. And this a representative, if you're curious, is Emily Randall. She's terrible. Look her up. But the 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 man requested that we provide him social support. I think I'll start with just reading you the thank you note, and then you'll know what he asked for. He says, "You don't know how scared I was, and I was able to overcome it with your help. Scared to pass out leaflets, scared of going indoors with lots of people due to COVID, first time in 5 years, scared to ask a question. You guys did great. Thanks for everyone you brought. You're getting Randall, the representative, to answer our questions, your help with passing out leaflets, your printing leaflets, etc." And then he offered to fix my bicycle. But what I mean to say by that is that it's never just what you have to offer. It is always also what you have to ask for. Um, and because of him, we had 13 people bird dogging this representative, and there would have been zero. Something else that my community just did in response, I think, to the food stamps and just the general like confusion was to get together and get together with people we don't get along with and come up with business cards. Each of us sat down and wrote out business cards on like perforated paper for everything we had to offer our community. Somebody said blankets delivered any hour, no question. Somebody said I have tropical plant starts. Somebody offered rides. Somebody offered cleaning and chores. Somebody offered the service of listening. Somebody was a dog groomer. Somebody who has a piano studio. He has an exercise room in the back and that we can all use it because it's dark and rainy and he understands how it gets out here. Somebody offered a writing songs for memorial services, and somebody offered dog portrait paintings. If anyone had a pet they particularly cared about, and somebody offered to take your laundry if you couldn't drive to get it there, and the list goes on. And I was really impressed because you would not think that these people all get along, and they don't, but they were able to get together and do this. So I think, on a personal level, the only reason I live in this house that I live in, which is kind of nice, and I really appreciate it. It took me 7 months to find in the house this economy, this housing crisis, is because I was helping the neighbors move. And they said, I got a call from a church and they said, "Can you come help us move these people's family out of their house?" And I said yes, and they said, come on down, and I definitely did that to help them move. And the conversation naturally went along the lines of like moving, and I said that I'd been looking for a place for quite some time. It wasn't that I didn't have the money, but they said, call that guy across the street, he's got like one too many houses. And I did that, and it felt very awkward and said, your neighbors gave me your number. Forgive me if it's like a trespass. And he said, huh, rent my house? Well, I'd never really thought about that. And I've lived here for 3 years since he thought about that. His only requirement was that I didn't have any specific feelings against any specific group of people. And and it's like we chose our own family out of that. And I wouldn't have gotten it out of a rental agency. You see what I'm saying? Um, and I think I do have
Macy, do you want to
a
finish with the
couple things.
story from Palestine?
Do you want me to say anything about my brother and the war economy and how it
Oh,
views us or not?
sure. Yeah, please.
And I couldn't really figure out in which order to do that. Actually, this follows perfectly. So I have a little brother um, who's been yelling at me publicly in front of my family wherever he gets the opportunity for years from spending all my time volunteering and thinking about other people and not taking care of my own life. Snap, snap, snap. And as it turns out, I'm doing much better than him in general terms. He might have a lot more money, but otherwise I'm doing much better. And and so it's been possible for me to say and with evidence, acceptable evidence in front of my family or anybody else that with the house example as just one, um, I have only gotten where I am by giving myself to other people. I, I would be nowhere in my soul or in my heart or probably in life if that weren't what I were doing. And it's hard to ignore because I am happy and I have safe place and and everything is is all right, but only because I didn't care about myself first. So from that, take you to Gaza. That was me, a friend who was fundraising for a family that reached out to him on Instagram, and I don't do social media. Um, but I do want. Let's see. It'll be just a second. I I'll read it off the computer actually. I do want to make it quite clear that no matter how little you think you have to offer, um, you have something, and if you think that your needs are not important enough to be met, you still have every right in place to ask the rest of your peace economy to provide for you. So this is a story from Sohaib in Gaza, and I think it's just a couple weeks old. Um, Sohaib Abu Raida was born in Khan Yunis in 2003. He had lived a modest life before the occupation began, its latest permutation of its deadly siege on civilians in Gaza. Since then, like most Palestinians, he has seen great tragedies and lost many family members as martyrs. This includes his grandmother, his father, who had led their family. Sohaib has stepped up and shown incredible selflessness in his community. What began as donations for a tent and basic food provisions became much more. Once donations started taking off in May of this year, all of a sudden there was extra money beyond what was needed for provisions. Sohaib took it upon himself to share what he received with his neighbors and community, blossoming into a new role he had not embodied previously. His humanitarian efforts have taken on various forms since then, building ovens to cook and distribute bread, cook soups and pastas for the neighbors in Al Mawasi. This was all well documented with video clips to provide transparency to the donors of Sohaib's fundraiser. Then there was a young orphan, Laith, who was wounded while trying to get flour at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation site. So Ayib had already taken this young man under his wing and would not rest until we collected enough donations for him to receive necessary medical treatments. But perhaps the most heartwarming moment came during an event that he helped organize to spread joy in the neighborhood amongst the children this past summer. The type of gathering are so important. Sorry for the, I'm translating. To increase morale and build community. This occasion had games, face painting, group songs, dancing, and gave out dolls as prizes. The joy in the eyes of the children was palpable and provided a moment of relief in a sea of hardship. So Haib has shown repeatedly that he will never cease to care for those around him, even to his own detriment. And I am happy to know him and so proud of his ongoing efforts from communist to al-Mawasi. In conclusion, when we think we have nothing, we can look deeper. And when we think no one wants what we have to offer, we are wrong in the best of ways.
Thank you, Macy. Yes, as we stand on the shoulders of the Palestinians, our liberation connected to theirs. It's such a good, both your life and that life, an example of what generosity, we live in a field of generosity, and when we enter it, it serves, it serves. So thanks, Macy, and thanks, Marie, for sharing, what the peace economy is grounded in our humanity. So we've gone a bit over time, which we hope you'll come back on Friday for our making, knitting, collaging, protest art, smoothies, and poetry. So, when we're talking about pivoting from consuming to creating, we're going to give you opportunities and help teach, model what you can do for others in your community on Friday. And next Monday, we're going to use this moment we're in of the holidays that are historically centered in community, caring, sharing, and we're going to take it back, and we're going to move away from consumerism and pivot into the practices of peace for the holidays, and really set you up for the holidays to be nourishing the peace in you and the peace in your community and the peace in your family. And next Friday, we'll work on how to cultivate community, because the peace economy arises in community. The movement that we need to get in the way of these horrors, it is all cultivated in community. So we're going to share skill sets from community building and storytelling and gardening and mutual aid and transition towns. So we hope you'll stay with us for these 2 weeks. Thank you so much for joining us. You can find out more at peaceeconomy.org. We've just taken you into a little sliver of what the peace economy is. There is so much more. See you again. Thank you so much. And love from China. Thanks, Marie. Thanks, Macy. Thanks, all of you beautiful peacemakers, for being with us.
Thanks, everyone, for being here.
See you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you.
Marie, you're the
I am. I've stopped the recording, and
okay.
yeah.
And you'll close it down.
Yeah.